for coming. It's great to get everybody together on a Tuesday. We haven't had a great guest speaker in a while, and we're going to have a nice series on a monthly basis. So this is the kickoff to it. So let me hand it over to Alan to introduce Dr. Allyson Maida, and we'll jump right into it. So thanks all.
Thank you, partner. Yeah, and Leno, do you recall, or Dr. A, do you remember when you came on during COVID? When was that, Leno?
It was April, late April, early May 2020.
I mean, Dr. A, you really pulled a lot of us in from off the ledge, and this is such an honor. So excited that you were willing to do this, and yeah, I think everyone's going to benefit greatly. For those of you that don't know Dr. A, she's had her private practice for about 30 years. I think 10 of those years are that I haven't known her, right? Known you for about 20 years now.
Yes.
Pretty incredible. She's a veteran entrepreneur. She's a leader in government and not-for-profit advancement, psychotherapist, business development consultant, speaker, author, and adjunct associate professor at St. John's University, criminal justice, legal studies, and homeland security. Absolutely amazing. I don't know how you found the time to be here, but I can't thank you enough. And she's going to talk to us about dealing with stress and anxiety and all that other fun stuff that we're experiencing now after this crazy pandemic. So with that being said, Dr. A, love you. Thank you so much for being here, and take it away.
Do this. All right. How did I find time? I wasn't speeding, I swear. All right. So in any case, I actually taught 2 classes this morning in Queens, and somebody called me on the phone. I'm like, I can't talk to you. I have to wrap my head around what I have to speak about. So that's part of how this worked. All right. In any case, so thank you for joining us. I've been kind of behind your scenes for a long time. And I remember Alan and Lane actually speaking with me about their idea. I've kind of been lurking in the back for a long time. It's really exciting. I'm so impressed with all of you. And I mean that, that's not just something to say. So thank you for allowing me in. What we're going to do today is talk about anxiety versus stress. This is something that is often misunderstood. And if you could understand it better, you can manage it better. So I want to start by saying this, that we're going to hit the ground running. This is not, I'm going to sit here, talk at you like some talking head, and then we all sign off and it's over. We're literally going to hit the ground running by me doing certain things with you. I promise you won't join a cult when we're done. You'll be fine. But the thing here is that I want you to be able to use your brain in a way where you get something out of this. And it's not just another thing you're listening to. And it's right, that's what I did for 45 minutes of my life. I want you to walk away with something. So I'm going to come at you from different angles. Sometimes you'll have to work a little harder to keep up because your brain will need to shift gears a little bit. First of all, I want to talk about the words anxiety and stress. These words are often used synonymously. Yes.
I'm sorry. Should we have a pad of paper, or are we going to have to write down things?
You know what? That is a personal choice. If you'd like to write things down, I'm not going to ask you questions and you have to go look for the answer. But if you'd like to, that's a great question, Alan. If you'd like to write things down, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Certainly helps in keeping the memory of whatever I say going.
Thank you.
Thank you. Randy Brickman's doing this thing. It's kind of great.
He's writing signs.
Yeah.
No, I'm writing your notes.
You're writing my notes. Thank you. Thank you. And I have to hire you to sell them to me. All right. In any case, all right. So we use these words synonymously. So people think that anxiety and stress are exactly the same. They're actually not. This happens, though, in many other places. So we have a tendency to take language that really has different definitions, and we happen to slam them together a lot, and it makes life very difficult. So I'm going to share my screen quickly with you, and hopefully, we can get on this. Everybody can see this? Yes, we're good?
Yes.
All right. So this is what we're talking about. We're talking right now about definition. And it would be nice if this just didn't do that. So in any case, we're talking about definition. And yeah, that's nice. Let's try this again. I'm sorry. This is how to waste time with Allyson Maida. All right, in any case. All right, so this says psychopath and sociopath. All right, the reason I'm putting this up is because these are also two words that people use interchangeably. And the truth is that happens in some disciplines like sociology, but in other disciplines, like my discipline as a victimologist and some of the other things that I do, it's not really interchangeable. You should be able to take words and pull them apart so that your brain can understand really what it is that you're trying to talk about. So in this particular case, because hopefully it's non-threatening and hopefully nobody in here is a psychopath or a sociopath, and if you are, please call Alan or Lane. In any case, a psychopath is somebody really, that's the person you want at your party. They're the life of the party. They're out there, they're great. They climb the ladder really well. They don't often think, they don't really care about who they step on possibly along the way if they're truly psychopathic. Where a sociopath is somebody who, they happen to be a little quieter, like the Unabomber. He was a nice little psychopath. So the thing is that those pieces are very different. So when you're speaking about something and you say something like, you know, he was all over the party, he was all this, he was all that, what a sociopath. Somebody like me will look at you and think, that doesn't make any sense. All right. I want you all today to learn how to make sense of things so that your brain can interpret it well and you can change your behavior or you can change your outlook. All right. We will get off of this scary page. All right. So let us go to me learning how to use my computer today. All right. So stress versus anxiety. Okay. Stress, you feel like you're under a rock. All right. Stress is a lot of weight. For anxiety, it's this foreboding. Okay. There's a sense of foreboding. All right. It's ongoing. Stress is really an incredible thing because you can problem solve stress. All right. So the reason we're back at like this type of, or we're with this type of slide is I want you to start to realize that you think categorically. We think categorically all day. This is what we do. You walk into a room, right away, you're sizing everybody up in the room. You know, you're figuring out who you want to sit next to. How do you even come up with that? It's the way they're dressed. It's the way they are sitting. It's their posture. It's what they have in front of them. And you're deciding with a limited amount of information who that person really, really is. All right. I'm getting rid of the slides. Goodbye, slides. All right. So when you're thinking categorically, you're doing that because your mind is trying to make sure that you're in control. If you walk into a place, like say a room, and your brain doesn't do that, you have no frame of reference. So your safety, your security net, if you will, emotionally, it's gone. It's completely gone. So you're always working to do two things. One, to you're decoding information. And the other thing that you're doing is you're thinking categorically as you're decoding so that things in life actually make some sense to you. All right. If your brain doesn't have anything to make sense, you have no frame of reference, you're lost. It's literally that simple. Okay. Our social vernacular is packed with physical expression and words. Okay. So you have some people like me, we're talking with our hands all the time. I know it's supposed to be distracting. I don't really care. In any case, so the thing is that you have people who they physically stand a certain way. You know, for everybody that was at Versa, right? Versa, that's where your party was last, right? Mm-hmm. Every single person, whether they walked in there knowing somebody or not, walked in and they were scanning the room and they were, we all did this and we figured out who was standing in what way. Who did you want to go network with that you didn't know before? Why did you do that? Because that person physically felt comfortable enough for you to go speak with. All right. So our whole social vernacular, you know, things on social media, things in our conversations, it's all set up with expression, which is both your words and your physicality. All right. The other thing is this. We have to ask ourselves, what are we saying and what is our brain hearing? So we say a lot of things, some of which we're sorry about and a lot of which hopefully we're not. All right. But when you're talking about something, you want to try to figure out why you're saying what you're saying. And also, what are other people hearing? So if I come into this room and I just drop myself down on my seat and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so stressed. First of all, I'm handing that to all of you and you now have to figure out what to do with it. But the other thing is I'm sending you a very strong message. My body language is all over the place. Physically, I seem exhausted. My mind seems a little bit gone. You're reading that. Now what's happening is we're all picking pieces of this up. The other thing that occurs is I could walk in and go, you know, Alan could go, hey, how have you been? And I'll be like, I've been so anxious lately. There's a different level of intensity to that. And again, I'm handing it back out. I'm putting it back out to you guys. And you're now trying to decode it and figure out categorically what to do with all of that information. Okay, so again, This big difference here is anxiety, there's a foreboding. Stress, you can problem solve stress. Even if it does not feel like that in the moment, that's really the truth. Okay, your brain is interpreting every single thing it takes in, everything, all right? Sitting here, my brain has all of this brand new information just like yours does. Maybe you know other people in the room, but the truth is that your brain is taking all of this in, the colors, the people, the motion, okay? How people are interpreting what I'm saying, how you're interpreting, the information just sitting in front of your screen. We interpret everything. The other thing is this, and I say this all the time, every single thing that you've ever experienced, ever, stays in your head, ever. The only time that doesn't occur is when you have some sort of brain damage. And you can't just say you have brain damage for fun. This is the real brain damage that wipes stuff out. All right. So this is why somebody could be walking down the shampoo aisle of in CVS, and all of a sudden they have tears welling up, tears are streaming down their face. They don't know why. And they suddenly remember that something happened to them 30 years ago that they haven't thought of since that period of time. It could be some kind of loss. It could be some kind of gain. It could be anything. And maybe there's a scent. Maybe it's the shape of a bottle. It could be anything. It could be the rug is dirty, that whatever it is. But your brain is holding all of this information all of the time, and it lets it out incrementally as your brain feels like it can, like how it can handle it. All right. Some anxiety, because I also don't want to forget this, some anxiety is genetics. It's built on genetics. So a lot of people like to say, well, I'm anxious because, my partner did this, or they did this at work, and I'm so anxious all the time. Sometimes, and it can be a significant slice of this, it can be genetically, like chemically driven and generated. So if you look back in your family and you feel that you have a tendency toward anxiety, which again creates that sense of foreboding, you may be able to look back and suddenly realize that, oh my God, my mother had this, or my great aunt had this, or my father had this, whatever it is. And you'll see it's a quick way to determine whether or not you may be, your kids, whatever, might be predisposed to anxiety. All right, so none of this is easy to deal with, by the way, especially when it's genetic. It's not an easy thing to deal with, but you can deal with this. All right. So I've had a lot of people come into my office. It's been a long, long time. And most people don't end up on medication. Some people end up having taken medication, they end up off, and some people are on. All right. But you can learn how to manage anxiety, even if it's genetically driven. So I can't explain that whole thing today, but as an overview, what I can say to you is this, is if you can get that under control, anxiety, forget stress for 1 second. And stress can lead into anxiety, but if you can get anxiety under control, it's like living your life with a whack-a-mole game. This stuff, it's subterranean. That anxiety just kind of lays right beneath the surface. It's just waiting for that opportunity to pop up like those little whack-a-mole things. And your job, having the tools to do this, is to kind of take your mallet and go dink, and that thing goes back under the surface. It doesn't mean it's not there because it's chemical, but it does tell you that you can actually manage this. And I've truly, for the long haul, I've seen people manage their anxiety. It's pretty incredible. Really, really pretty incredible. So we live in a society where a lot of our attention is focused upon stress. All right. And I'd like to just take a break for a second and hand this back to you because we don't have a room with a ton of people. But let me ask you a question. Why do you think that our society is so bent on maintaining stress or creating stress or talking about stress? Why do you think that is?
Because it runs rampant.
Right. Right. But what does running rampant even mean? I know.
Everybody's stressed. Our society is kind of geared us this way with the cell phones and the dings and the notifications and different forms of mediums of communication. It's just become a world that doesn't know how to slow down.
Right.
And I think that's stressful.
It's very stressful. Right. And listening to it, did anybody feel any stress just based on that alone?
Listening to you?
Listening to what Steve just said.
Oh, listening to you. Yeah, stress me out.
Listening to me stresses you out?
No.
You'd be married to me.
Well, we can talk.
That's great. Thank you. All right. So, but think about it, like what Steve is saying is absolutely the truth. Is we at every corner, we're kind of like swimming through this, I don't know, this lake or whatever, that's built, exactly. It just built, it has built-in stressors. And certainly living in a society where things can never move fast enough, that creates stress also. I happen to use the word strain a lot. I use it interchangeably, depending upon the circumstance, with the word stress. So I want you to think about the word strain for a minute, like straining your muscles, straining your thoughts. That's literally what stress is like. We're constantly straining to make something happen, which is why we then feel this. It's the same thing. That's why we feel the stress that we talk about. The other thing is this, is if you listen to people who are in their 20s, 30s, and certainly younger, but like 20s, 30s, early 40s even, there's this whole thing about stress. You can ask anybody. It could be the holidays. It could be super festive. And you're like, how are you? And they go, everything's great, you know, I'm just managing my stress lately. You know, so stress is literally, the word stress is now built in to our daily narrative. But if you're hearing this over and over, remember your brain is busy interpreting. That tells you you're supposed to feel that most of your day. Like when you take a break, there's nobody talking about that. You go back to the office, everybody's like, oh my God, I'm so stressed. Your brain categorically goes, what does stress mean? Let me interpret this. Oh, I remember that was like that day my kid ran away in the zoo. Oh, that was like that day where, you know, all of my coffee spilled all over my computer. And your brain is bringing things up super fast. And you're registering stress even when you don't know it. So your job is to say, I don't really need to do that. And I know that sounds very simple, but it's really a mechanism to do that. I don't need to think about when I spilled coffee all over my computer. It has nothing to do with now, Jay.
So I feel that people interchange demands and stress.
Yeah.
Right. So there are all these demands on me. Is it stressful? I don't know, but someone else might call it stressful.
Right.
And as an example, well, I don't need an example, but
Yeah,
I kind of feel that's a big shift in society, is that just because there are demands on you, that doesn't mean, that it's stress.
It's mindset. You have to choose if you want to let it stress you out. It's all about your mindset.
Yeah, Steve, I agree, but I think people are now interpreting demands as stress. Right? Like just because I have to deliver X, Y, and Z, that doesn't make it synonymous to when I lost my kids in the zoo.
Right. And right. So a lot of this has to do with how you choose, and it's a choice, how you choose to manage what you're involved in. So, Jay, you can have an experience. I can have an experience. Jake, you can have an experience. We can have the same experience, but we can come away. It's like the story about the guys with the elephant, right? That are all blind. They all have different descriptions of what that elephant is. And we would have 3 different experiences, or we could say, oh, in common, we have this, but I felt this, I experienced this, and it can be very, very different than the next person. That's true. Like when I'm listening to Alan talk about what I do, like I don't think about all the things I do. I just go do them, and I hope I bring excellence to the table. But when you start to hear it, it's like my reaction was like, who? That's like a lot of stuff. All right. If I let that sink into my head, the truth is I won't be able to do, and I know this is a fact, I won't be able to do what I do. Not as effectively anyway, because I'll be caught up with thinking about the strain of having to deliver every single thing. You see what I'm saying?
And I think I think it's specific, right? I mean, Dr. Allyson, with your private practice, I'm sure it's more difficult to address a group because, right, we all have our own definition of what stress and anxiety is, in our own lives. But I know when I speak to my father, the Marine, and I talk about stresses, he's like, oh, that's not a stress, and it's, we're all, I speak to some of my very wealthy clients, their stresses, I wish I had some of their stresses. I don't really perceive them as stresses, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Makes total sense. It makes total sense. And also, again, so I brought up like a different generation. You're not wrong. So we have the generations that came before us, and their lives were very different, and their interpretation of things is very different. So, all the guys from Brooklyn, like my dad, somebody will say something and he'll do this. Alan, it's the same thing. You almost had his voice down, by the way. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
it's the same thing. He's like, and I'm like, it may not be difficult for you, but it's difficult for me, or it's difficult for her or him. So
Yeah.
absolutely, it is. And it's interesting because like I said, I taught 2 classes this morning, and also it kind of goes back to what Jay was saying. It's all about how you handle what you are doing. So I'm going to say something's a little alarming, but this was a part of my morning. All right. This morning, I talked about acid attacks, how people throw acid on people because they've done something that's dishonorable to the family or whatever. I mean, we're talking about, I have visuals, the whole thing, talking about it in depth, and then talking about other things that are just on par with that. Okay. I can't absorb too much of that, because if I do, I'll end up with vicarious trauma. This is the truth. I'll end up carrying the stress that doesn't belong to me. And then I would bring that stress, I'd be uptight, I'd bring that to you. So you have to find your mechanisms to take a break and say, okay, this is the way it is. Like Jill, obviously Jill has something about wine and fun. Jill, you're like, well, my best friend. So the thing is that it sounds like Jill knows how to take a break. And if you don't, now the heat is on you to go learn how to take a break. All right. But you have to stop and take a break. I couldn't take the phone call in the car. I needed to be present for you. All right. That decreases my stress immediately. It's just immediate.
So Dr. A, how do you deal yourself, right? My sister used to be a social worker at the nursing home, and she
Right.
would take that home every day, right? She's dealing with 160 residents, their families, their stresses, people dying. And I'm sure it's very similar in your practice that, you're meeting with 10, 15 different people a day. And how do you not bring that home with you? And how do you compartmentalize that? Because Lane and I, listen, working with, doing V50 for 2 years, 7 months, we've taken on a lot of other, stresses.
That's right.
You
That's
know,
right. It's a lot. Well, there are a couple of answers to this. One is there's nothing better in the world, I think, sometimes than foot reflexology. All right. I just say that to you. I literally will leave my office and I've done this even when my kids are little. I'd go jam something in between my house and my office so that I had to stop, because my tendency is I'm going to keep thinking. I'm going to come up with more ideas, and I'm going to, figure out how to intervene this way. And you can't get it out of your head. So you literally, it's like a doorstop. You have to jam something sometimes, it's all deliberate thought, into place so that you can stop. You have to stop the train. You have to stop the train. If you don't, it just runs over everything. All right. The other thing is it's the inertia. And I think what you're talking about, this concept, the concept of inertia also plays significantly here, which is, when you're driving, somebody's driving down the throughway and a truck stops suddenly and the car hits the truck from behind, what happens to the car? Right. Pam, exactly. Pam's like, right. So the car, Pam, you meant it gets crunched, right? I got the right interpretation. All right. So now all of a sudden you have like this squished up car. Generally speaking, the truck is okay because of its constructs, generally speaking. All right. However, if you really think about this, it's not the stop point that caused the car to crush. It's the inertia, the energy, the molecular system's not done flowing. So that's why the car, if it was all about suddenly stopping, the truck would stop, the car would hit it, it would be stopped, it'd be done. But all of that energy is still moving through. So that's why the answer is you have to get yourself to stop somewhere. And Alan, I think you know this, but I think Lane knows this also. But I talk about some really tragic things, and it's not just that I have this, this wonderful, amazing private practice, but I'm also a victimologist. So I get called when there are community fatalities. I've been doing this for a long time. Okay, like Sandy Hook, like I got that call. So the thing is the question is, how do you take that out of your head? I think this is my own. I can't tell everybody to do this. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be able to make an impact that it all seems to just be okay. I can't undo everybody's problems. I can't remove the shooters. There's things I can't undo, but it's nice to know that I have the ability to just add a little drop of something and make somebody's life better. And that's where I'm good. It's just gratitude. So that's my that's my key, Alan.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Everybody needs their own key. And good. You guys drew us right to the right place. All right. So what my next question here for you guys is can you problem solve most of what you hear about in the course of your day? Like, can you really do that? So we're embedded in, I don't know, political pressures, social issues, personal issues, indecisions, pandemics, things at business, things at home, things on your block, whatever it is, right? But do you have the ability, like, stop and think about this. Do you have the actual ability to problem solve most of this, or is it a never ending plight?
I think you have the ability to problem solve if you take it one action at a time. Because if you get too overwhelmed, it's, you know, it's that old saying, you can't change crazy. And I always say, being a New Yorker, is nothing shocks me anymore. You know, you think you've seen it all. Once in a while, you see something and say, oh my God, I can't believe that. But then you process it and say, well, that's just going to happen.
Right. But you're allowing it to have its own space, right? The people that become very stressed out and people who tend towards harboring anxiety or developing anxiety, they're the people who don't understand what you just said, Lane. Those people have a tendency to go, but there's the pandemic and the bats from China and the things and the this. They're just building this skyscraper of problems. They can't problem solve, but they see that these problems are real. And when you start to build that, it becomes so large that there's no way out. There's just no way out. So Lane, you're completely right. We can problem solve significantly. My question is always, what are you doing with your chunk? Everybody gets a little piece of everything. The pandemic, almost everything. Politics, what are you going to do with your little piece? And it's a great question, because if you can do your little piece, you'll feel a lot better. Maybe you didn't change the whole schematic, okay, the whole thing, but you could change your piece and feel good about what you did, because at least you played a role in something.
I was gonna say real quick, I go back to mindset. You can have a mindset of scarcity or a mindset of abundance. And I think, not that it'll fix it, because there are a ton of things that need to happen that are going to stress you out, but it makes it easier for me to get through the day. Just an attitude of gratitude and just the right mindset, man.
Right. And from my end of the planet, this is all neurologically based. So it's not like, oh, I have like a positive mindset. So yeah, your brain is physically shifting and making physical changes. Like if you were laying on a whatever, you were having a PET scan done, you could watch a lot of that occur. So you're physically shifting when you do these things. So when you have negative perceptions about things, or you tend towards negativity, certain parts of your brain light up, okay, because it's active. Well, the same thing happens if you decide to make different decisions, or decide that you'd like to see the world in a different way, like this attitude of gratitude thing, right? Other parts of your brain lights up. And it's really, it's such a good positive activity that your brain wants more. I'm sure I'll say this at another point, but I'll say it now. We don't give for no reason. We give because of what we get back. And when somebody told me that, I got so upset for like 2 weeks. I couldn't even, I hated them. I was like, that is the most outrageous thing. I give because I give, and then I'm done. But neurologically, she was correct. If you went to, I don't know, some community center that has young children, and you brought peanut butter and jelly sandwiches that you made with your family, and you walked in and the kids are like, yay, peanut butter and jelly, and they're all thrilled and the staff is thrilled, would you go back? Would you do it again?
Yeah.
Right? Easy. What would happen if you walked in with your pretty little tray and you're doing your thing and you're all excited, and maybe you have your kids with you, and you walk in and somebody goes, ew, takes one of the sandwiches, throws it in the garbage. Another kid's like, oh my God. And the next thing you know, I have a bunch of little kids telling you how terrible you are and your sandwiches suck. And then the staff member walks over to you and goes, you know what? No protein. You're going to load our kids with sugar. Thanks a lot. Would you do it again?
Probably not.
Yeah, no.
Maybe.
Yeah, you're such a tough guy, right? The reason you don't do it again, or you change something about it and then try it again, is because your brain has registered something negative, and there are chemicals that work within the negative. And so your brain doesn't want that. Your brain wants dopamine and all these other things. It wants to have like a dopamine party. That's what it wants. So when your head feels good, you're apt to go and do it again, because you have this innate desire that's driven by your brain to bring you back to the same place. Pretty good. You guys are okay? Everybody all right?
Amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So
Thank you.
basically, you're welcome. So basically, you have a decision to make. You really do. I mean, this really kind of dovetails a lot of this conversation. You have a decision to make. What do you want to own? I teach a lot of people that come through my practice, and certainly the larger presentations I make. I teach everybody this, and now I hand it to you. When there's something in front of you and it stresses you out, or it's something you don't think is good for you, you have to ask yourself, is that mine? You know, what that person's doing, is that mine? And if that doesn't belong to you, if you don't have control over whatever that is, you need to actually say, that's not mine. Just say, that's not mine. And by the way, if you say it out loud, your brain hears it differently than if you're banging things around in your head. So even though you sound a little nuts, you may be standing around somewhere and something's happening, and you can kind of quietly utter, that's not mine. You know, we all do that quiet uttering thing. It's passive aggressive often, but we do it, right? That's not mine. When you say that, and you try it out today, because you'll have probably an opportunity to do that. Try it. That's not mine. And all of a sudden your brain goes, right, that's not mine. And there's like a physiological change that actually exists for you. The more you do that, the more control you have. The more control you have, and the more you're able to identify your controls, the less stress you'll have. Because when people present their stressors to you, or there's a circumstance that's stressful, you'll be able to categorically put things in their place. You can sift things through. The next thing you know, you feel okay. You can just let it go, because it doesn't belong to you. Okay. You can't control the pandemic. You can't control the economy. But again, you can control your little pieces. If you feel like there is something that is controlling you, the first thing, because you can't be in professional hands all of the time, is to stop and ask yourself whether or not this is yours. And ask yourself how much control you have. So for people who have obsessional thinking and they have to watch the news all the time, they're trying to find some sense of control. Okay, it's not that the news is bad, it's fine, but not if you're obsessing. You can control your obsession. You can. That's a fact. All right. The other piece is this. Let's leave us on the upside before we go to some questions, answers, what have you. Is this also applies to your dreams and your visions. You know, V5O is a good example of this. You guys had this idea. You felt and you perceived that there was a need, and you thought, how do we do this? And no matter what stressors arose or what you had to sift through, you figured out where your comfort zone was and you went ahead and did it. And that, I'm sure, is a large reason why this is as successful as it is. Everybody in here can take what they want to do in their life. You talk about potential. You take whatever you want in your life and ask yourself, how much control do I actually have over that? How much of this is going to be stressful? And how much of that stress do I own? Or is that like something about somebody else? You know, afraid of being judged? It's not you. They have a judgment problem. You're fine. So it's anything like that. So I think from here, outside of me saying to you kind of categorically, you can choose between stress and anxiety. You may be feeling like you're anxious. It may be stress, which means you get to like downsize it and you can go problem solve it. All right. But you have a lot of decisions that you can make, but all of this is based on you stopping and thinking and making a decision. And there you have it. I blew through. So are there any questions about this? Thank you, Steve. Any questions about this?
I got one.
Okay.
So they say it takes the brain, I don't know, a certain number of minutes to actually transfer from one activity to another. How long does it actually take for you to be able to refocus again properly on a new task?
It really depends upon the person. You know, for people where they where they have like a lot of what I call brain clutter, all right, it'll take them longer because they have to sift through things. Literally, it's like a sifting project at an archaeological dig. Some terrains are a little tougher than others. So there's no number or a specific formula to apply to that.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Jay.
Yeah, I like the topic. Do you see that people take what is stress, meaning things that you can manage, and turn them into anxiety? And how do you avoid that? How does one avoid that?
Well, you avoid it if you know the difference. That's why I brought the psychopath, sociopath thing up in the beginning. If you think that the words mean the same thing, then to feel anxious is just, that's where you go. And the next thing you know, you're being swept away by this endlessness. So the answer really to that is to really actually know the difference. But for people who they've had stress, it turns into anxiety or vice versa, again, you have to pull it apart. It's the most effective way. Your brain, if I say to you, hey, Jay, could you get a chair for me, please? And you bring me, I don't know, a watermelon, your interpretation of what chair is very different. It may not work for me, but at least you went and did something because you thought it was right. So we have to pull things apart in the way that we define them. And that's why I find that language is very, it's neurolinguistics. Our brain is always interpreting. So you're going to be charged with, you're going to do, back to the chair idea, you're going to do whatever you think is right based on your definition. It's about defining. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And what about, I'm not sure what the question really is, but what about those people who are always, everything is a stress point or an anxiety, like what is it with them, and how do you talk to them? Because we have a friend of the family and everything is, oh, did you hear about the shooting? And oh, did you hear about inflation? And oh, it's like, oh,
Yeah, it's a little rough to be on the outside of that.
Yes.
First of all, it can be genetic or in part genetic, but then it can also be socially learned. I find that generally speaking, nothing is 100% genetic, that there's social learning on top of that. So if that person has been raised, for instance, in an environment or with other people where everything was an issue, okay, or maybe they were always struggling for some reason, those struggles, even though they're in earnest, end up like layered onto that other person, and they grow up having to have that same stress or chaos. Sometimes it's chaos. All right. So it's harder to talk to that person because you can't fix that. So while you're trying to explain to them that it's nicer out than they perceive it to be, it can be problematic. And the reason I'm laughing is I was in the car with a friend the other day. We decided to go up to Peak in New York. Lovely, right? It was gray. It wasn't raining, but it was just kind of gray, blah, over the weekend. And we're driving. And I said to the person, God, it's just so great out. The air, it just feels great. And he said, it's like death. And I was like, what? And I'm like, I'm in the car and I said, well, it's not really like death. And he goes, no, the leaves, they fall off the trees. Now everything's dead and it's bare. And he's like, and little Miss Sunshine here said, no, it's about restoration. If the trees don't fall off the leaves, and do their biodegradable thing in the ground and nurture those trees and everything else, there's nothing left to grow. So this really is about restoration. But he was hell-bent on it's only about death. I don't let it go. There was nowhere to go. And I would be just trying to prove my point. And then I'd probably just want to jump out of the car, which makes no sense. So it was enough. So sometimes, Jay, you can't really take it past a certain point.
Yep. Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Pam, I see Pam with a hand up.
Okay, Pam, sorry. There you are.
Yeah, no worries. No. So I just wanted to share something that I do, particularly when, you're thinking about when I'm thinking about global issues, right? And the pandemic and the Ukraine and all, to allow myself for a small window of time to actually bear witness to what's happening, be aware of what's happening in the Ukraine and these terrible, terrible circumstances that so many people, are going through. And I feel that, because I can't, go out and get a gun and go and fight on their behalf. I can give money and I can send socks and things, but ultimately it's not going to stop Putin's, march. But just bearing witness to it and acknowledging what's going on, I have found for myself, I'm not ignoring it, but I'm not also living in that conflict. It's bearing witness. And I think somebody told me that that's part of the Jewish faith as well. I'm a Catholic, so what do I know? But that's a component of some faiths, is just to the ability to bear witness to what's occurring, and that helps you through it.
No, and Pam, I think that that's perfect, because what you're talking about is being present. You're not flowing through your universe or your life in denial or going, I can't deal with that, so that doesn't exist.
Right.
It's really good. Check in. I think that checking in is a really important thing to do, or you're functioning in oblivion.
Yeah.
As long as she says it's not mine. So she's got that.
Right.
part
Well,
down.
yeah, right. Again,
Well-
I recognize I can't, pick up arms and get on a plane and, go and do it. But I'm not ignoring it either.
Right.
I don't know, maybe that's an elitist perspective, but anyway, it helps
No,
me.
not at all.
Wow.
I think it's just the way you deal with it, naturally. Listen, when the conflict in Ukraine started, I was obsessed with that, just following every freaking minute of that. And then I realized it was causing so much anxiety, because, the warmongers and people terrifying you that this guy is going to push a nuclear button. And now it's no longer so far away, in a distant land, and you're watching these helpless people. And being of the Jewish faith, they said, Germany, Hitler would never happen again, yet it's happening right in front of our faces. And I'm not looking to get political, but I was overwhelmed to a point where I just disconnected from it because I had to.
Mhm.
And Alan, on the flip side of that with Ukraine, I spoke to a friend of mine whose grandfather is still alive. He's a Holocaust survivor. And when Putin invaded Ukraine, his response was, great, let the Ukrainians get what they deserve. So it was that whole different perspective of a gentleman who's close to 100, Holocaust survivor, and said, let them, that was his perspective.
Yeah.
Right. And it probably kept him from being stressed. It kept that comment, like it or not, kept him safe. Right. So it's interesting. There's different sides to so many things, right or wrong. They're just,
Yeah.
But, I want to jump back, if you don't mind, for a sec, to Alan's question before about his sister being in the nursing home, and she had all these people. And I remember many years way before the pandemic, you and I actually speaking about this. And, and you asked me a very similar question over lunch. It was a very similar question. It was like, how do you do this? When you're in charge, you need to appear like you're well wrapped. You do. So you can have a really difficult day, or somebody, somebody is falling apart, and now you're falling apart. You have to pull it back together. And when you do that, it's not necessarily slipping into your own denial, but it's actually giving your brain a break, which is interesting, because you can't stay in that space anymore. You can't absorb all of that stuff and then be okay to really be helpful. So your sister clearly understood that, she may need to go home and fall apart, but while she was at work or doing whatever, that she needed to just let it slide off her back, and everybody had to be important. There's an old Christian song, a very old Christian song, and it talks about, it's called "The Warrior is a Child." Very interesting song. The lyrics are amazing. And what it talks about is this warrior who goes out, he goes towards the big guy, he's out there, but when he goes home, he takes off his armor and he cries. The next day, pulls himself together, he puts his armor back on, and he goes back out, and he's a strong man, he's victorious, but then he has to go home again. So everybody has, so when I say don't, the stress and the anxiety, it doesn't mean you're not supposed to feel these things, but don't let it consume you, because that's when you have a problem. But to feel those things, that's being present, that's being natural, that's organic, that's fine. There you have it.
Amazing.
Well, that's my shtick.
Katrina, you deal with people that are stressed and anxiety ridden every day.
Yeah, it's interesting because I just finished with a client, and it's a little bit different for her because she's got some real, I like the differentiation between stress and anxiety. That's something that I might bring up with her in our next call. But she's got some real serious stressors in her life, and with health and grief and things like that just aren't being resolved. It's like a snowball effect. And so this is really, this is important information for me. But it's interesting that I like the element of choice, right? What can we control and what can't we control? And focus on those things that we can control. And find a way to let go of the things that we can't.
And it's categorically relatable. I almost couldn't say that, but it's the truth. Everybody knows what it's like to be in control of something. And everybody also knows what it's like to not be able to control something. So when you ask yourself, is that mine? You know, can I control that? I can't. Your brain so fast is going, yeah, and that other time and that time. And remember when it felt really good because you had control of that? And remember the first time you rode a bicycle and you actually didn't fall, or you got back up and then you rode and your parents were jumping up and down. Like truly, your brain is accessing so many different pieces of information so that it's relatable. So that makes it engageable. So for your client, you know, it's the same thing.
I think Sabrina has a question, and then Stephen.
Thanks.
So just out of curiosity, would fear be like kindling or like a fire starter for stress and anxiety?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Hands down.
Why do you ask?
Just a curious question.
Just curious.
Asking for a friend.
Thank you.
We're all family.
Longer answer. I can give you a longer answer, but the answer was really yes.
Stephen.
Yeah, I'm asking for a friend too. So is there a healthy level of anxiety? Because I've always felt that, I don't know, that there is in whatever you're trying to achieve, there's going to be that rough road, kind of like butterflies, that, you know, when it's not too stressful, at least, or anxiety, I mean.
All right. Thanks for choosing the word. So, you know what? Is there a healthy level of anxiety? You could argue that there is. You could say, like, you know, there are people that say, you know, worrying has no benefit. Well, actually, worrying has a benefit because there's a healthy level of worry. It provokes you to do other things or not do other things. And anxiety can do the same thing. I would venture to say, though, there's a healthy level of stress, and anxiety is really not so terrific.
Okay, that makes sense.
You know, you can always herd butterflies, right? But you can't, you know, can't do that with anxiety.
Right.
Anybody else? Sarcastic comments?
One quick point I'll make before we wrap up, and let me know if you agree with this, Allyson, which I think you will. And a lot of people have heard this story. You know, my life was very different prior to March 2020. But I believe, and I do know, that a lot of the stress and anxiety that I have gone through over the years, a lot of it was just self-inflicted. Things I was doing to myself that I could have done better, like exercise more, get more sleep, drink less, do this, do that, because the combination of it all tends to get overwhelming, and it doesn't go away on its own.
Right. Well, you're talking about compounding issues, right? So like if you only didn't, you know, exercise enough, that'd be one thing, but it's that, and then it's eating, and then it's not sleeping enough or whatever it is. And then there's this, and then you're worried about something else. One thing compounds the next. And that's why it builds. And, you know, when you have things that are compounded, if it was a unit like weight, it would become dense and very heavy. It makes it harder to get through it when you have a lot of things compounding the next. So it's like paying off your interest versus your principal. If you have compounded interest, you just have this rolling thing forever. If you can get that to stop and separate things out somehow, you can get rid of that, pay your interest, and you're done. Well, yeah. And I'm glad you know that, Lane, because a lot of people don't realize that. That's really quite excellent.
Doesn't mean I practice what I preach. I'm just saying.
You do, though.
I try my hardest.
You were an
I do.
inspiration throughout COVID, man.
Thank you.
Helped me clean up my act too.
That's nice.
You can continue doing it. One thing I'll mention before we break is Dr. Allison has been gracious enough. We're going to have a different topic each month. Sometimes it might get delayed a week or two due to scheduling, but we're going to try to stay consistent over the next 5 to 6 months. So thank you for that. And lots of really amazing topics. But Allison thought it'd be great to kick it off with anxiety and stress, because that's been a kind of a huge theme for all of us over the years. And we're going to keep parlaying it into other amazing topics and discussions and things to think about.
And
Yeah.
on that, I'm sorry, Alan.
No. I just wanted to remind everyone also, if you want to, continue your conversations, Lane and I will circulate Dr. Allison's contact information. She does have a private practice, and she's done wonders for me. A lot of my clients and colleagues, absolutely, incredible, very comforting, soothing to speak with. And I strongly suggest if you're dealing with something, definitely, bounce it off of her.
And thank you. I appreciate that a lot. If there's a topic that you want to discuss, it may thematically roll into what we've already designed, or maybe it's something we should add. So I don't know, does that go to Kim? It should go to somebody, not me, somebody. So whoever that should go to.
Sure, send it to Kim.
Thanks, Kim, you're the best.
I'll
Well,
gather.
It's 1 or
Thank
2
God
less
for Kim.
emails.
Thank you.
Look out for Kim. Oh,
On
God.
that note, there is one quick thing that I do want to say very quickly, which is when we put this together, we ended up using the word potential. And the more I thought about it, the more 1990s it started to sound to me. So there's a chance that we will be changing that word, because most people have potential when they're born, when they're neonatal. So the thing is I think there's probably a more striking word. So if you see it shift, we're still on the same platform, but it's my message to you saying, we've got this, let's go do this. Not let's talk about maybe, sort of, can you do it? I'd like to make it, I think, a little stronger.
Just give us a heads up, because I'll have to turn to my Canva expert, Jake Van Ness, so we could switch up the backgrounds.
Absolutely. I think potential, like, for some people out there, like, oh, please, not again. So.
Anyone
Awesome
else?
stuff.
Anyone who hasn't spoken? All right, you fixed everyone.
It's a miracle.
You're too good.
You guys
That's
are
a wrap.
amazing. So thank
You're
you.
not supposed to fix them that quick.
Well,
Come
that's
on.
right. See, this is why I practice. This is what I keep hearing.
Yeah.
This is a great busy week. Thank you so much, Dr. Allison. Don't forget, we got our final member spotlight tomorrow for the fall season. And then we got our final happy hour of November before we all celebrate Turkey Day. So I'll put it out there. If anybody doesn't have a place to go, my door's open at home. The more the merrier. So
Same
please
here.
come, please come.
Dr. A,
And,
do you have
it's
anything
great.
to share or promote?
I'm launching a new campaign, which will be rolled out pretty soon, and it's probably called Out of the Box. That's the working title.
Yeah.
Because most of what I do is very outside of the box, like
Mhm.
talking about stress, and then I'm asking you if you're a psychopath. So, it's all about neuroscience and helping people to get to a better place. So, I'd ask everybody to watch for that and join in when it's time. So thank you for asking.
Amazing.
Thank you all.
Love you
Have an
all.
amazing rest of the day. Appreciate it, everybody.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Dr. A.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
See
Lamar.
everybody soon. Bye-bye.